Hey, everybody. Welcome to Ag Marketing IQ In Depth. We're here with David Widmar, and this is Commodity Classic Week. We're going to be taking a long look at where we think the market's going, but what we're going to talk about today is where can you take your farm and how can you manage your profitability regardless of what's happening with the government, with the markets, with your neighbors. We're just going to dive in. What can you do to be profitable on your farm? Welcome, David.
Thanks so much, Pam.
We were talking earlier about the importance of working capital, budget review, looking at what you need and what you don't need. Reminded me of Dr. David Cole's bird poop factor for deciding which assets to keep and which assets to get rid of. So what are your thoughts on looking at your working capital and your assets?
Well, these are the uncomfortable conversations, right, Pam? These are the things that these are the decisions that we have to make that are going to take us months to undo or going to take us months to analyze, and then we got to make that decision. So we're talking about things today that producers, even if they start working on it, they're probably not going to get. It's going to be to the end of the summer before they can actually say, heads versus tails, like that David Cole analogy of, keep an eye on these factors. So the first one is working capital. Working capital is that balance sheet metric. I think it's one of the sources of a lot of bad farm management advice, if I'm being honest. A lot of times we'll hear people say, oh, producers need more working capital to get through the farm economy downturn. Well, yes, but we just can't get more working capital. And the second thing is that working capital is a symptom, not the problem. So even if you could replenish the working capital, you have to attack the underlying profitability problems. I think another thing that comes up with respect to working capital is cash flow and the timing of cash flow. A lot of times in agriculture, we put together a budget, we get a Schedule F at the end of the year from our accountant, and we have a balance sheet. We don't think about cash flow statements and cash flow projections. And if you're a growing operation, if you want to think about a multi-generational operation that you're putting together or that you're sustaining, really think about cash flow projections and managing towards working capital goals. That could be a really key setup. The other conversation I think is going to be really tough for producers is around assets, underutilized assets. So maybe this is a piece of farmland that's not doing like we would like it to do profitability wise. You think, man, should I sell this piece of farmland to free up some work, free up some working capital or free up some debt payments on my balance sheet or my cash flow position? Or maybe, going back to that bird poop analysis, maybe there's a piece of equipment that I'm just not using as much as I thought I would or that I should be using. Again, these are tough decisions. I think it's always important for producers to think about what are the full implications. And so if we're selling an asset, then maybe there's some income tax implications, right? Also think about what am I going to benefit from this? Is it going to be cash that I can use as working capital in my balance sheet? Or is it going to be less payments that I have to pay every year in the future? So these can all be important to the analysis to make sure that we're really tackling that and we're really diving back in. I think the other point here is cash rents. I don't know if we want me to dive into that right now, or you want to re-emphasize anything. Cash rents, we're listening to this in spring, so not the time of the year to be renegotiating those cash rents, but I think it's that time of the year for you to start making that list. What's that one or two pieces of farms that you're just not happy with the returns or you're not happy with the productivity with? You're going to think about this when you go out to plant. You're going to think about, man, this field just is always a source of frustration for me. So fast forward to fall. Start doing that analysis this spring. Start putting together that list. Start putting together the analysis over the summer. That way in the fall, when it comes for cash rent renewal, that you're going to be in a good position to do that. One of the charts that I've been sharing as I meet with producer groups is in parts of the Corn Belt, the cash rent is more than the revenue we have after paying variable costs. Now, that's before government payments, but the idea here is that when we put together a budget, we want to make sure that we're able to cover our variable costs and our cash rent and have something left to cover our other fixed costs in the operation. So we got to do some right sizing around cash rents. And it's that time of the year that's really important. I like to remind producers is that there's a lot of levers in cash rent. One of those levers is the rate. Maybe we're paying cash rent. Maybe it's a cash rental agreement. Or maybe there's some sort of sharecrop agreement. Or maybe there's some sort of bonus flex structure. And so if we got to have a conversation about things not working at the current environment, go in with a wide set of options so you can hear out those landowners, hear what they're facing and what they're thinking about, what they're worried about, and you can still find your way to a win-win. But ultimately, don't get yourself into a situation where you're having to subsidize renting a farm with earnings from other parts of the operation. I always like to remind producers, never underestimate what your neighbor's willing to accept for a return to rent that land or to own that land. They might be willing to accept a very, very low rate of return. Don't just try to outbid them. Make sure you go in with your numbers and your cost structure and you do what's right for your operation.
Well, and the fear always is, I'm going to lose that piece of land. If you're losing money on it, does that matter if you lose it?
Well, in that case that I mentioned, Pam, so we use budgets out of the university budgets. We take a look at many states in the Midwest. You take the budgeted revenue, minus those variable costs of production, and you compare what they call contribution margin, the difference there, with cash rent. And the idea here is that if you're not covering the cash rent with that contribution margin, you should shut down. You should not farm that land at all. Now, the next phase is that you have enough contribution margin to cover the cash rent, and there's excess. That excess is then used to cover your machinery, your labor, your family living. That's that tough situation where you're not making as much of a return as you would hope, but you're still making a positive. And so those negotiations have to come in place. That's where you have to kind of lay your cards out to the landowner and say, this is where I'm at. This is what I can do. This is what I can't do. And these are the reasons.
There you go. And be prepared to walk away.
Be prepared. I think the other thing to keep in mind is everything you say yes to is a future opportunity that you're saying no to. And so we like to think about, if we walk away from this farm, that's kind of going backwards. But I think the piece that we might miss is that if we keep holding on to this farm that we're not happy with, maybe it's a piece of land that we own that we're not happy with, or maybe it's a piece of land that we rent and we're not happy with, it's going to prevent us from making a yes on a future opportunity to rent or to own a land. So just make sure that you're not setting yourselves up for long-term frustration, just kind of holding on and trying to make this piece of land work for your operation.
Sounds like these tough conversations are all about positioning ourselves for future opportunities instead of hampering what we can do today.
Exactly. Positioning is really that long-term success, is that if we can get ourselves into a good position and we can make progress this year to put ourselves in a better position next year, that's going to really accumulate and it'll pay dividends for years and years to come.
And that's what we want to do year in, year out, no matter where we are in the economic cycle. Thanks for joining us today, David.
Thanks so much, Pam.